All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the call. My name is Charles Chamberlain, and I'm the Executive Director of Democracy for America. We're honored to be joined tonight by Senator Elizabeth Warren, and later on in the second segment of tonight's call, Montana Congressional candidate Rob Quist, and DFA Chair Jim Dean for what promises to be a fantastic conversation. Now, before I bring Senator Warren on the call to talk with you, I want to make sure you know that she would love to take your questions tonight. If you'd like to ask a question, please press 0 on your phone, and you'll be connected with a DFA staff member. So again, just press 0 right now if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're listening to the call on democracyforamerica.com, you can also submit a question through the live web stream on the right-hand side of the page. Now, I know Senator Warren only has a limited amount of time to spend with us tonight, so I want to jump right into questions and welcome her to the call. So let's start with a question right off the bat. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us. What do you think the chances are that there'll be a government shutdown here as we come up on Friday, Trump's 100th day?
Well, I really hope there's not one. But I got to say, this is going to be the Republicans. They're going to have to decide here. Do they want to hold the entire country hostage for Donald Trump's wall? This is like one of those things you really can't believe it, that they might actually shut down the government over it. I think everyone's going to back off from that, but the Democrats have been pretty clear, and that is that we're not going to go for a spending bill that has poison pills in it. We're willing to negotiate on some pieces, but not poison pills. And funding Donald Trump's wall is a poison pill, and we will not do it. So I hope they don't shut down the government, because I hope they stay backed off on the idea of getting funding for the wall.
Yeah. Well, it certainly seems like things are going well that direction. They talked about today about originally they were going to try to do another Trump care vote today, and they've pushed that back. Maybe not even happening on Friday, even the White House kind of wants it. So it seems like the momentum's on our side. Now, Trump released today his tax cut. They're calling it a tax reform plan, but it isn't. It's tax cuts. I'd love to hear if you have any immediate thoughts on that. I'm sure you're still reviewing it, but what do you think?
I have to say, though, Charlie, the minute I saw it and just kind of did the first read-through, I thought about the fact that Donald Trump has run 4 companies through bankruptcy. So evidently now his plan is to see if he can run the United States through bankruptcy, right? He wants billionaires and giant corporations to pay lower taxes and then, leave scraps for working families. Let me just, one part of it that I just really, it makes you want to choke, is that America's biggest corporations have stashed more than $2.6 trillion in profits offshore. So what does Donald Trump want to do? He wants to give them a tax cut. I mean, think about that. He wants to give tax cuts to giant banks. He wants to give hedge funds that set up complicated tax structures for their executives another tax break. This kind of tax reform is really just another giveaway to the rich and the powerful. If he really wanted to do tax reform, he'd close up the loopholes for the rich, and he would put working families first. But that's not what interests Donald Trump. He doesn't want to go in that direction.
No, in fact, he's kind of doing the opposite, right? He's closing up the loopholes, you could argue, for individuals by getting rid of all sorts of deductions across the board. And yet creating new loopholes for businesses to be able to pay significantly less taxes. Senator, can you explain, when they talk about the corporate rate and they say it's at 35%, they want to lower it to 15%, and yet we see in the news the top 500 corporations basically don't pay any taxes at all. How do we grok that? How does that work?
That's the part that's really amazing here. Working families, man, you pay the full ticket. Small businesses pay the full bill, even medium-sized businesses. But giant corporations, the ones that, for example, can stash profits in tax havens overseas, the ones that can get the special loopholes written just for them, or for their industries, those guys have managed to walk away paying either nothing or virtually nothing. You look back a generation ago, and corporations were paying about 30% of what it costs to run the federal government. Today, the number is down around 10% of what it costs to run the federal government. And that means everybody else is picking up the difference. And that's really, for me, kind of the core of what you look at. Who is this country running for? And the answer is pretty clear. It's running for those at the top. It's running for giant corporations. Giant corporations invest in lobbyists who get them loopholes. They invest in tax specialists who can make sure that they pay nothing. And they just shove the bills for everything else off onto working families. It's one more example of how the game is rigged.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I got your book. It's fantastic. I know I don't know if you've actually started your book tour, or if you're about to start it. Have you already been on the road?
I actually have. I've been to, I had so much fun. We were in Massachusetts, and we went out to Mount Holyoke and just had a terrific time. I've been out to Chicago, and I'm going to be going other places. I've done a reading here in Washington. I'm in Washington today. And I think the most fun part about it, Charlie, is I get a chance to read a little section from the book, but then to talk about the basic argument of the book, what it is that the book is really about, and then get to do lots of questions and answers afterwards. And it's really been a lot of fun out there, and a lot of, I'll say it this way, it's encouraging to me that there are so many people who are engaged in the ideas and engaged in the fight, which is what this book is about. It makes a long argument about a long narrative arc about what's happened to America's middle class, talks about the reasons why, but then talks about how to get in the fight and fight back. DFA members know about that, right?
Sure do, absolutely. Fighting every day alongside you, alongside Bernie, alongside all the economic populists in Congress that are working to try to make it so that we have a economy that works for everybody, not just for the people at the top. No question about that. And of course, I definitely want to, for DFA members nationwide, thank you so much for your leadership in that regard. In your book, you specifically describe about when you're talking about the middle class, so you talk about how it was really a solid middle class built through 1935 to the 1980s, and then it starts to decline from there.
Yep.
But, one of the things you mentioned is specifically, though, that even with the great solid middle class we had, there were some communities that were completely left out. African Americans, Black Americans across the country were especially impacted. I'm wondering, moving forward, how do we rebuild the middle class, but not just rebuild it, ensure that all Americans are included?
So that is exactly the right way to look at this, Charlie. And if I can, I'll do the very short version just to fill in a little bit of the blanks on what you were just talking about. So this book talks about the fact, basically, from 1935 to 2016, GDP keeps going up across America. And then I divide it into two time periods, 1935 to 1980 and 1980 going forward. You all know, 1935, coming out of the Great Depression, what does America do? Two basic things. We regulate a lot of the big industries, banking, put a cop on the beat on Wall Street, start enforcing antitrust laws on the idea that we're going to give small businesses a chance to flourish and grow, and we're also going to make sure consumers and the like don't get cheated and small investors don't get cheated. Second thing we do is we do progressive taxation, which is where you and I started this conversation. We tax those at the top and then use that money to invest in education, in infrastructure, roads, bridges, power, all across this country, and in basic research, in medical research, in scientific research, in engineering research, in behavioral research. We did those things and we built a great and thriving economy and a strong middle class. Now, I talk about in the book how it wasn't perfect by any stretch. African American families were locked at the bottom. The black-white wealth gap was there from the very first time we started measuring. But here's the deal. We became committed to the idea of expanding opportunity. So by the time you hit the 1960s and 1970s, the black-white wealth gap shrinks by 30%. In other words, making those investments in education, making those investments in infrastructure, along with the civil rights movement, along with making sure that people had access to voting and making sure that there were equal employment opportunities and trying to equalize educational opportunities, started to shrink the black-white wealth gap. Then the 1980s hit, and we all know what happened. Ronald Reagan, deregulation, fire the cops on Wall Street, reduce the enforcement of antitrust laws, and most of all, cut taxes for those at the top. And that meant less money for infrastructure, less money for education, less money for research. The economy slows down, and what happens? America's middle class starts to stumble. America's middle class gets smaller and smaller. So here's the thing. Keep in mind, GDP is continuing to go up. From 1935 to 1980, the 90% of America, everybody outside the top 10%, the 90% of America gets 70% of all the new income growth generated in this country. Not perfect, but heading in the right direction. Black-white wealth gap shrinks by 30%. 1980 to 2016, GDP keeps going up. But the 90% of America, everybody outside the top 10%, the 90%, how much do they get of the new income growth? Answer, zero. Nothing. Nearly 100% of new income growth from 1980 until now has gone to those at the top. And the black-white wealth gap has tripled in that time period. So the way I see this is that, we really have our backs against the wall here. And it's 90% of America. We got to be in this fight. And the key, as I see this, is it really is about expanding opportunity for everyone, making sure that everyone gets full educational opportunities, making sure that infrastructure investments are all around this country and not just concentrated in a few places, making sure that we're making those investments in research as we go forward. I think that's how we build an economy, and making the commitment that this is going to be an economy that's going to work for everyone, an economy that's going to work for people regardless of their color, work for people regardless of their religion, work for people regardless of whether they were born here in the United States or came here from someone else, what their sexual identification is or their gender is, that it's a real commitment to opportunity, not just for some of us, but for all of us.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to get to member questions in just a moment. We got a lot of questions coming in. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I do want to make sure that everybody that's listening knows that if you'd like to ask a question, you can press 0 on your phone, and you'll be connected with a DFA staffer. So, again, that's just press 0 right now if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're listening to this call on democracyforamerica.com, you can also submit a question to the live stream on the right. So, Elizabeth, in the first, 100 days we've been there so far, since the inauguration, we've seen a surging resistance from the work here at Democracy for America. Members are engaged. They're energized. We made 300,000 phone calls, voter contact calls to in the race in Kansas. We've raised, well over $60,000 for John Ossoff. That's just candidates. We've also seen, rallies, people making phone calls, all that kind of thing. What we'd love to hear is, from your vantage point of being in the Senate, how are you seeing the resistance? What does it look like to you from in Congress?
So I'm going to start with Trump is worse than we thought he would be. And the combination of Trump and a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, I mean, they're just in there pounding away every day. And it's, the team that Trump put together of billionaires and bankers and handed the keys to the economy over to them. But it's a lot of things that aren't even getting attention, like the fact that Trump has signed off now on a law to make it easier for government contractors to steal people's wages. Another law that makes it easier for companies that kill or maim their employees to hide that fact. That makes it easier for investment advisors to cheat retirees. I mean, that's really the direction that Trump has driven this country. And the Republicans, man, they are just doubling down on trickle down. That's where they're headed. But from the way I see this in the Senate is nobody's laying down and playing dead, and that the energy of the grassroots has absolutely electrified people in the United States. And I have to say, on both sides, that our side feels the energy. We hear from people. I can't overestimate the importance of having more and more people in the fight. I mean, you know this at DFA, but getting involved in groups. When I go out, you asked me earlier about when I'm out talking to people about the book, and I take questions and answers. People almost always ask me, what can I do? And the first thing I tell them is join a group. Join a group, because groups are how we get ourselves organized, and it's how we stay in the fight, and it's how we know what to do. You can sign up for telephone calls. You can pitch in a few dollars. You can find ways to be able to contribute and to stay focused on the issues that are the issues in front of us right now. The second thing I'd say about all of this is we can't shoot at everything that moves. Donald Trump is truly the master of distraction, right? We just do one thing, and then we do another, and then we're doing 7 more things, before lunchtime. And a big part of this is we really have to stay focused, not on what crazy thing Donald Trump just said, not on what bizarre thing he just tweeted, but on what he's doing. And if we stay focused on issues and hold him accountable, it makes a huge difference. And I'm really seeing that out there. I want to say around the whole fight around healthcare, I want to thank everybody on this call and thank DFA and everybody who got engaged in this, because a big part of what happened was that people across this country started paying attention to the issue. And when they did, we had some really thoughtful debates. People started talking about things like, wait a minute, insurance companies used to be able to deny people because of pre-existing conditions. You remember that whole discussion, Charlie, right? And then they backed up and said, wait, we got to go in another direction. And here's the thing. The fact that so many people made their voices heard, the fact that so many people were engaged, meant that when they negotiated the bill, and I get it, the reason it didn't pass was because for some Republicans, the bill was not brutal enough. But the point was the rest of the Republicans wouldn't follow them off that cliff. They said taking health care away from 24 million people and driving up the cost for millions more middle-class Americans so that you can produce tax breaks again for a handful of millionaires and billionaires is not what we want from a reform of our health care system. And the fact that so many people got engaged really mattered in Washington. It mattered to Democrats, and it mattered to Republicans. So just take this as eyewitness testimony from me. People were totally knocked over by phone calls. People were totally knocked over by the number of emails and the number of Facebook posts. And the fact that folks all across this country have gotten engaged in healthcare, have gotten engaged in the issues that are bearing down on us right now. I truly do believe democracy is changing in America right now.
I think that's definitely true. I really like the point you make there about don't over-focus on what Trump says. Instead, focus on fighting what Trump's doing. I think that's a really, really important message to get across because, like you said, we've got to make sure, I think we can fight just about everything on some level, but we have to choose where we're going to have the most amount of force and put the most amount of interest on. And I think that it's easy to do that when the 24-hour news cycle matches what he's actually doing. And I think the key is to make sure we listen to your advice there and not overly focus on the latest tweet that might be a distraction to try to pull us off. So really, really critical. Also, really want to thank you for pointing out that Trump Care was killed largely not because of the Freedom Caucus and their extreme position, because let's face it, their extreme stuff would have passed Congress. They would have approved it. They would have been the big heroes if it wasn't for the fact that the resistance was blowing up phone lines around across Congress, shutting down not just Democrats, not just right-wing Republicans, but every single member of Congress was getting it. And so these sort of I guess in the Trump era, moderate Republicans were too scared. And definitely what we're seeing in our attitude is that what we need to do is we need to make it so hard to be an elected Republican in America under the Trump administration that you choose keeping your job over sticking with Donald Trump. And I think that's what we did with Trump Care, and we need to continue to do that over and over again moving forward.
Yep. You know, Charlie, in fact, I'll add to what you're saying, because I think what you're saying is exactly right. But this is really, too, about the fact that it wasn't just us who called. It wasn't just Democrats who called. It wasn't just progressives who called. We got out there and did some serious recruiting. And I think this is powerfully important. I think that we've got to talk not only to each other, because we keep each other energized and we hold each other accountable, but I also think a big part of this movement is reaching out and talking to other people, making the commitment to talk to your sister about this, talk to your nephew about this, talk to your crazy uncle about this, talk to the person standing behind you in line at the grocery store. You don't have to be, threaten somebody. You don't have to get, aggressive about it, but you can talk about it. About the number of people I heard from who just talked about what it would mean if Obamacare were repealed in the way the Republicans wanted to do it, and that they had a family member who was in a nursing home, an elderly grandmother who was in a nursing home and relies on the money that comes through Medicaid. Or the parents I talked to who said they had kids with very complex medical needs, and Medicaid helps out to make sure that those kids get to live at home and don't have to be institutionalized, get to live at home and get the kind of help they need to realize their potential. All of that would have been cut off with the Republican plan. And I think the more that we talk about what Donald Trump is doing, what the Republicans, and listen, it's Donald Trump and the Republicans. Can I triple underline that? The Republicans in the House and the Senate. When we talk about it in more personal terms, when we talk about it in real terms, I think that has to be a big part of what we do. We want to draw more people in, and more people for which we say, stop looking at what he says and pay attention to what he does, because he's trying to take away the independence of a lot of people. He's trying to take away the care that we give to our elderly and our special needs kids. He wants to take those things away from us, and that's not who we are as a people. We're better people than that, and we're going to get in there and fight for what we believe in. We're going to fight for our values.
Yeah, that's right. That's not America. We want to live in the America that we believe in. I'm with you on that 100%. Let's make sure we get a couple questions in here before you go. I've got David calling in from, I just lost, from Plantation, Florida. David, are you on the line?
I am. Thank you very much. Thanks, Senator Warren, for taking my question. I want to ask, what do you see as the best approach to trying to overturn Citizens United? Because in my estimation and what I hear so many talking about is, we no longer have a democracy. We have a government that's run by high-paying donors. And is there enough political will in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, both Democrat and Republicans, to wean themselves from this type of funding?
Okay. So, Dave, the question is exactly right. And what I talk about in my book is when I talk about what's happened in America, the first time period, 1935 to 1980, we really invest in building opportunity for our people. And then 1980 to 2016, we're really making the country run for those at the top. I then do a whole long section on the impact of money in Washington. Money slithers through Washington like a snake, and it really will kill democracy. I'm with you on this. Citizens United is part of it. I'm gonna make three arguments. First one is yes, absolutely, we need to repeal Citizens United. I'll be blunt. That's part of why the debate over Merrick Garland and then Gorsuch were so important. That Gorsuch locks in another vote that is pro-corporate. And while, it's not specifically about money, you can kind of guess from that, since when it's employees versus corporations, he goes for corporations. When it's consumers versus corporations, he goes for corporations. When it's women versus corporations, he goes for corporations. I'm really
seems
worried
to be a theme there
for the Supreme Court. Yeah, it seems to be a theme there. But so part of it, obviously, was we got to get back in the majority. We got to have more influence over what happens in the Supreme Court and where the justices come from. The other one is to talk about doing a constitutional amendment that makes it clear that this country does not run for corporations, and unlimited money is not advancing our democracy. I think there is appetite for it. In the United States Senate, there are a lot of folks who would like to do this and talk about this on our side, obviously on the Democratic side. But I'm just going to be honest with you, Dave. It's just not enough. We just don't have the numbers yet. So this is one of those ironies. We got to win in the elections before we have a chance to make the democratic systems stronger. And that's tough. But here's my pitch again. They've got money, they've got power, but there's more of us than there is of them. And we got our voices and we've got our votes. And if we get out there and we recruit and we talk about the issues, look, we beat them back on health care. The Republicans in the House had voted 60 plus times to repeal Obamacare. Donald Trump said at least a bazillion times during the campaign on day one that he would repeal Obamacare. Day one came and went. And that didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen was because of all of us who spoke up. That tells me that there is power in democracy, but we just have to be organized and use it. And that's why, for me, DFA is so important. The fact that we all get together here, we hold hands and we say we are in this fight all the way, and we're going to take what it does. We're going to do what it takes to rescue our democracy. So I'm there, Dave.
Yeah.
Let's just get some more people in the House and Senate to make it happen.
That's right. You make a really great point. I mean, over and over again, people power is what has won the day, even against massive corporate money. When you look back in history, for some 40 years, Democrats dominated the House of Representatives while still being outspent by Republicans 10-1. Yep. We're not even being outspent at that level anymore, and yet we could still beat them as long as people are engaged and active. And proof of that is things like the 20-point game we had in Kansas in a deep, dark red district. The fact that we came in first in the first of the primary election here in Georgia is a great example. Again, another place where the Republican won by 29 points, and we coming in first place ahead by over 20 points going into the runoff. So it's definitely the energy is there, and we can beat big money with people power. I think that's absolutely true. Let me finish up with one last question for you. This is a question that was written in by Linda Levensold from Fishkill, New York, and she wanted to ask, do you think that the Democratic Party's future rests in being more of a big tent party or one that is ideologically driven on a specific goal?
I think Democrats need to get out there and talk about our values. I think that's what the Democratic Party needs to be. We need to be a value-driven party. We need to talk about how to build a future, not just for some of our kids, but for all of our kids. For me, that's truly what distinguishes us from the Republicans. Lowering the interest rate on student loans, debt-free college, expanding Social Security, raising the minimum wage, holding Wall Street accountable. And yes, it means a woman's right to decisions over her own body. I get that there are going to be people in the Democratic Party who don't agree with every piece of the Democratic Party's platform. We are a party made up of diverse people and diverse opinions. But the way I see it, the Democratic Party needs to see where the energy and the grassroots of its party is. And either the Democratic Party will jump in front of that and lead it, or it's going to get left behind.
Yes, that is so on mark. And with that, Senator, I want to thank you again for joining us. I know you've caught a cold and you've been, fighting it all day. I really appreciate the fact. Yeah, well, I really appreciate the fact that you came through for us and continue to do this call. It's always fantastic to talk to you. So thank you so much. And I want to say to DFA members nationwide, if you didn't get a chance to pre-order her book, This Fight is Our Fight, The Battle to Save America's Middle Class, I strongly recommend you check it out. It's a fantastic book, and Elizabeth really makes the case for how we can rebuild and how we can fight together to make America work for everybody. Now, next, what I'd like to do, I want to bring on our chair, Jim Dean, to introduce our next guest. Jim, are you there?
Charles, I sure am. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you, Charles, and a special thank you to Senator Warren for joining us on this call. And I also want to especially thank everybody who is on this call and who's taken time out of your schedules to be with us this evening. Folks, on May 25th, the great state of Montana is going to have a very important election, a special election for the one Congress seat that it has. And this race has huge implications, not only for what we're doing and the work that all of us want to do right now, but will also have big implications for the 2018 races that are going to come up, and it will have big implications in shaping the national narrative. And we are absolutely thrilled to have endorsed Rob Quist, who is running a very strong campaign in Montana. He's a very popular musician in Montana, but he also has a long, long history of public service. He has a long history of supporting Medicare for all, supporting working families, of opposing Citizens United, and supporting political reform. So I want to say to Rob Quist, thank you so much for stepping up to the plate to run this very strong campaign and to speak for all of us around the country. Rob Quist's opponent is actually one of the weaker of Republican recruits. He's actually from New Jersey, a billionaire from the tech business, and he's actually run a few times already and lost. And the last time he ran for office, he ran for governor last November in 2016. Democratic governor won that race, even though Trump won the state. So this is a very, very winnable race for our side. We have a fantastic candidate who is going to be a voice for all of us here. And with that, Rob, we'd love to welcome you to the call, welcome you to DFA, and hear more about your race. And again, say thank you for stepping up to the plate and see what we can do to help, sir. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for putting me on the call today. It's such a great honor to be on this call today. We are out in Montana. We are campaigning 24/7. We're doing, to use a basketball analogy, a full court press on the state of Montana. People are very surprised that I have decided to put my performing artist career on back burner, and I think that it all comes down to the fact that at the end of this last election, many of my friends just wanted to disconnect and kind of give up, but I realized that this is the time now when we need to stand and make our voices heard. And I've just been so gratified by the response that the people of Montana have given me. I think that the state, the Big Sky country, is fired up like I have never seen before. People are turning out for our rallies, and people actually come up to me at the end of the rallies to shake my hand with tears in their eyes that I would make this sacrifice, to step in and carry this race on against my opponent, Greg Gianforte.
And, you're absolutely right. He is a flawed candidate in so many ways. One of the big issues out here is our public lands. Montana is known as the last best place for a good reason, because 29% of our state is in public lands, and he is funding groups whose sole goal it is to take away our public lands and move them into private hands for development, natural resource development. He's been clear about that, and he's blocked stream access. He has a home on the East Gallatin River, and he put up a chain link fence or a gate and to lock people out, and sued the state of Montana, but lost that debate. And of course, his whole issue is just on wanting to support groups that are going to cut Social Security and Medicare. You know the drill. I mean, he's meeting with these special interest groups that are just have just no thought in mind for the people of this nation. So, as I said, I'm really having a great response. Max Richmond, who with the the National Committee to Protect Social Security and Medicare, sent out a questionnaire to both of us, and he didn't even bother to respond. But Max loved my response so much that he came out and did several rallies across the state with me and gave me their endorsement. He also gave me a pair of boxing gloves for when I get to Washington, D.C., which I thought was pretty amazing. And so, but here's the thing: is that in order to win out here in Montana, we have to appeal to a wide variety of voters. We have a base of about 40% of our populace, which are identified as Democrats, and then of course there's quite a few independents. But also, you have to win over Republicans, and I think that's what we're doing. Just every day I hear people that identify as Republicans and come up to me and say that they're voting for me. And, I know that this is going to be not the easiest race in the world to win, but I really have been focusing on the common ground that we as Montanans have, and not to get too caught up in the hot button issues that they always spin. Of course, you can imagine one of the things that they're spinning is that of course, I'm all about taking their guns. They always go to that silly playbook, that same play in their playbook about, everybody coming to take their guns. And then he's also, they took something out of context that I said on an interview about sanctuary cities. So this is what they do. They lie to get people to vote against their best interests. But I think the people of Montana are wising up and are not going to have it, so. And that, of course, another thing, too, that I came out from the very beginning is taking a stand against Citizens United. And so it's been very clear that the other side, the Congressional Leadership Fund, is spending about over $2.5 million in attack ads against me. But the thing is that we've seen in poll numbers that this isn't changing anything. It's not. They're just wasting their money. It's not working. But anyway, this is a short, compressed race. It's only 85 days long, but we are in full campaign mode. I have one of the best campaign staffs that can be assembled out here, especially due to the fact that there are no other races going on. So I just love my campaign staff. And we have Bernie coming out here probably in sometime in early to mid-May. That's going to be a big boost for me. And I have artists like J.D. Souther, this a great songwriter, came out to do a fundraiser for me. But anyway, the energy is palpable, and we are excited. We really feel like we're going to carry this through over the finish line, and so we can't wait to bring this state, this office in a blue regard. John Tester says that he needs a partner in the House, to help him bring legislation that'll benefit the people of Montana. And so we're going to work hard. We're going to do everything we can to live up to the trust that the people of Montana are placing in it with us, and we're feeling very good about where we are. Just want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you. So anyway, this is out in the Big Sky country. I hope to be sitting with some of you in Washington, D.C. very, very soon.
That's fantastic, Rob. I'm so glad to hear that it's going so well there. And I couldn't possibly agree with you more that when they're spending big money on TV ads just trying to trash your record and what you're saying, that's not going to be as effective as direct voter contact. That's the key to winning elections, is personal conversations with real people. I've seen you doing that out on the trail. I think you're really good at connecting with people. And we just want to thank you so much for running such a good, hard campaign in a deep in a red district that you can win.
Well, that's the thing too. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, feel free to. What would you say has been, I know you don't have a lot of time, and I want to let you get back onto the campaign trail because you have a campaign event I know you're about to go to. But if you could, maybe give us one quick story from the trail about something, that you learned from a voter, or that an event that happened, or something you saw your opponent did that you want to share with us, that'd be great.
Well, I just had my first debate with him. It was actually for the Billings Gazette editorial board, and of course, it was. I was able to really call him on a lot of things because, you're right. I've been making a personal connection with the people of Montana throughout the primary and throughout the election so far. I've been to almost all the counties in the state of Montana, whereas, he's just been kind of, he flew to Washington, D.C., to meet with special interest groups, and he's been having a few things. Donald Trump Jr. was out here. They did 3 events where people had to pay $35 to get into the event, and then $10,000 to have a few minutes with Donald Trump Jr. And so, to me, this is how you win an election. You make a personal contact with the people, and so I really feel that that's going to carry the day for us. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the debate. I was able to nail him pretty good on some things about his support for some of these groups that are whose sole goal it is to take away our public lands. And so I think that the debate went really well. We're having another editorial debate on Friday, but the big one is going to be on Saturday night from 7 o'clock. It's going to be on statewide TV, and so that's going to be the important one and a real chance for me to connect with all the voters of Montana. So,
there's so much public land in Montana. There's so much public land in Montana. I mean, that's, it's really critically important that you're out there fighting to protect the public land. And I know that's a very popular issue that, both sides of the spectrum, whether you're, a Republican sports person that goes out and hunts, or if you're just a regular person, or if you're one of the tribes, then you need those public lands to be out there and protecting, and someone out there fighting to protect your interests. So thanks so much for running on that, Rob. We really appreciate it. I can't wait to see you use those boxing gloves in Congress, but I think you might need those boxing gloves on the campaign trail first.
That's right, and we plan to. I'm using my proverbial boxing gloves here for the next debates. But we've been prepping for that. I think we're ready to take him on, in front of the state, and so we hope to bring this home and make this a Democrat seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. And one more thing, he ran for governor, as you said, and lost. And, I think that the state of Montana is going to say to him that this U.S. House seat should not be his consolation prize.
Yeah, you've hit that on the head. Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you very much for joining us. DFA, this is a critical race. We can win it, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to take work. That's why DFA members made thousands of voter contact calls last weekend, and that's why DFA members are making more calls this coming weekend. This Montana special election is an incredible opportunity to elect a strong progressive and continue to resist Trump and the Republicans in Congress, but we're going to need your help to get out the vote. So you can go to democracyforamerica.com/Montana. I know that's hard to believe. democracyforamerica.com/Montana. That's the page you can go to sign up right now to make calls on DFA's dialer in support of Rob Quist. So one more time, that's democracyforamerica.com/Montana. If you've made these calls, or if you've made calls around the country before, one of the things that's really fun about calling a state that doesn't typically get phone calls, when you get presidential elections and lots of elections across the board, people get lots of calls. Nevada, if you're in a swing state, Pennsylvania, but, Montana doesn't get it. So one of the things that's exciting about calling into Montana is you have real conversations with voters that actually want to hear from you. So I think you really can enjoy these calls more than the necessity that's needed in many other races. These aren't just needed, they're fun too. So definitely sign up to make these calls this weekend. That's democracyforamerica.com/Montana. And with that, I want to thank so much Senator Elizabeth Warren for joining us, especially while she's fighting a cold. And to Rob Quist, the candidate in Montana special election coming up just next month, less than a month away. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for all of you DFA members across the country who joined this call, thank you for being here tonight. Have a good night, and let's get to work.